buddy Mike Messier. So now we're going to talk about referees. Nick Patrick, in my book, could not be a great classic referee, even though he was involved in many great classic angles and big matches in WCW. I believe, I could be wrong, that Nick Patrick had some WWE time on SmackDown once the acquisition took place. I could be wrong, but I'm having a memory. If I'm wrong, I forgive my goddamn self. But I think that Nick Patrick's problem, and I've said this to a good friend of mine, Nick Patrick was too tall. He was too big, he was too tall. The only time that Nick Patrick, to me, was effective as a referee was when he was refereeing cruiserweights, because then this big kind of goofy guy, Nick Patrick, who was good at his job technically, he re-emphasized the smallness in size-wise of the smaller wrestlers. A Rey Mysterio and Psychosis with a Nick Patrick as a ref is pretty good, although Psychosis was pretty big for a cruiserweight. But basically you get my idea, which was Nick Patrick was too big for a referee. Who's the greatest referee of all time? Tommy Young, period, end of story. Now, if you don't know who Tommy Young is, we got issues. But we can talk about the greatness of Tommy Young. He actually looked like he cared. He looked like the match was important. He had a face bent to his refereeing. In other words, it looked like he was looking out for the good guy, for the Nikita Koloffs challenging Ric Flair. I believe that Tommy Young had to be the referee for Starrcade 86. It had to be the case. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm a fucking asshole. But I'm going by memory here. Tommy Young, the way that he would slide physically to make it count, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, he would do a baseball slide to make it count. That was terrific. Tommy Young pushing, he and Ric Flair did a little spot that I think Tommy discussed once with Bill Apter or someone in an interview, where they would kind of do a little pushback, which I think they invented that referee spot. The heel champion, or the heel, in this case Ric Flair usually, would push Tommy Young, the ref, and Tommy would push him back. And he'd point to his little badge, his little circle on his shirt, and say, "I'm the referee." Tommy seemed emotionally engaged. David Crockett, a lot of people have, mixed feelings about him as a commentator. He used to be picked on all the time. Now people kind of appreciate David Crockett as a commentator. Would always put over Tommy as the referee. Tommy! Like they would call him by his first name. He didn't wear a cliche or a goofball striped shirt. Tommy would usually wear some kind of blue shirt or like a jersey and like kind of these, not khaki pants and not sweatpants, but like kind of a weird athletic pant. I think he wore white sneakers of some sort, but my point is not to give a fucking fashion analysis of Tommy Young, who's probably 70 years old now, or 60 at least. I'm just saying he had a cool look. He was doing his job, but he had that little emblem, and that meant something. And I think that as I'm rehashing these memories in my brain, the old-time fans, it just goes without saying what I'm saying. The young fans, maybe they get some appreciation out of this, maybe they don't. Maybe they do the fucking research and say, let me look into this Tommy Young fuck. Look into Ric Flair matches circa, 85, 87, 88. Tommy Young was doing all the big matches. Lex Luger, Ric Flair, I believe at I want to say Great American Bash 88, and I think the rematch, Starrcade 88, the first couple of pay-per-views that were wide seen by the NWA. Of course, you had Starrcade 87 and, Bunkhouse Stampede 88, which weren't widely seen. Tommy Young, greatest referee of all time. Now, what was his size? Because I just made the statement, and I hope I'm not offending Nick Patrick, because I think he did do his job well technically. He was just too tall. Should have been a wrestler. In fact, Nick Patrick did wrestle. And not just Chris Jericho, with Jericho's arm tied behind his back. Nick Patrick wrestled some legit matches. Maybe he should have stuck with it. But if you look at Tommy Young, how big was he? I think he was 5'9", 5'10". I don't know, but he seemed to be a good-sized guy, but never too big that he was intimidating. And he wasn't scrawny. He was a mid-sized guy in a land of bigger than mid-sized guys. Nick Patrick was a larger guy than you had to be a referee. See, that's my issue, and we'll just go into me for a minute, if you don't mind. What could I be in professional wrestling? I've been a ring announcer. That's probably my best forte, and a commentator for Top Rope Promotions, among other promotions. I'm very good at it. Obviously, I have a knowledge and a good memory for wrestling, and I'm one of those commentators that I'll make references to old wrestling matches while I'm watching the current match, and maybe that gets to be a little bit too much. I can temper that down. A ring announcer I can do very well. A manager I can do very well, but the problem with me is I'm not a scrawny, sniffling manager. I'm a manager. If I were to be a manager, it's not the best fit because, and I'm not, a muscle man or anything, but my physique would lend itself, like, why isn't this guy just wrestling? I'm talking about myself here. Why would I be the manager if I look like I could handle myself, or at least not be a total joke in a fight? And I'm not putting myself over. I'm just saying I don't have the look of a scrawny, piss-ass manager, which is the type of manager look that I like. For instance, Gary Hart, World Class Championship Wrestling. This book I keep hearing about, this Gary Hart book, I would love to read it. But I like Gary Hart. He had a very cool look with kabuki and so forth. Great speaker. Gary Hart was huge. If you look at Gary Hart, he was intimidating himself, 6'5" or 6'4" or something ridiculous. Gary Hart, even as an older guy, was someone that you kind of you're fearful of this guy. He would have been a really good commissioner. I mean, these commissioner roles that we always have now. Gary Hart, Time Machine, he would have been an excellent Gary Hart, commissioner of SmackDown, and you'd be engaged with that, or whatever the fuck. Or something like TNA or something, or whatever it's called now, Global Fuck Wrestling. Call it that, Global Fuck Wrestling. What I'm getting at, and this is kind of veering off, so I'll have to talk about a lot of things now. You looking the part, okay? For those, and there's a kid, and it was a kid, a young guy, a friend of mine's in the wrestling business. He's a manager, and he had this young guy who's friends with, who was going to the wrestling school and training to be a wrestler. But the problem was, the kid, with all due respect, was not athletic enough to really pull off being a cruiserweight even. He didn't have the high flying ability. He was just a good kid who loved wrestling. Maybe he could take a bump, I don't know. But I said to him, why don't you be a referee? You could be a great referee. He was just athletic enough and had the enthusiasm that if he were to, and he, I'm not putting the kid down, but he wasn't terribly bright. He could help set up the ring, be very enthusiastic, help set up the seats, and be a ref and get a good paycheck. And that's not an insult. See, that's what people get insulted if you say things in a matter-of-fact way. But the kid, honestly, probably didn't have the fortitude or the physique or anything, or the flying ability to really be a cruiserweight. But what the fucking could be is a goddamn referee. We need good referees. And I could have helped that kid study Tommy Young, or even Nick Patrick, technically, but just knowing his size was a detriment. People love to talk about the fucking Hebners. Hebner. I've got no problem with Hebners. Earl and Dave Hebner. I mean, before they were in the WWF exclusively, and I think they had to go there exclusively after the Andre the Giant February 5th match, 1988. I believe that the deal with the Hebners was they had a cool thing because they were twin refs, but they never did that angle, as far as I know, the twin refs, until Andre beat Hogan, February 5th, 1988, Friday Night's Main Event. The Hebners were good. They had good, they would get excited. Tim White, I'm a Rhode Island guy. Tim White's a legend around here because he owns a bar called The Friendly Tap. Tim White was good. He was, his physique wasn't the best because he was a big guy who, I mean, he was good, but he wasn't as good as Tommy Young, okay? So Tim White, B+, okay? For the WWF, it was good that he actually had a personality, and that came through. And then his whole suicide angle was poor taste, of course, but it's WWE, and it's 2006, 2007 WWE, or whatever the fuck, 2004. What other great referees? The whole thing now, I guess, is this female referee. I've got no problem with that. I think that could work. I think That's an interesting situation because you could, I think the thing to do in that, and that's now it's politically correct or whatever the fuck you want to call it, millennial thinking, why can't you make that a storyline? Why can't you make that the female referee is only allowed to referee female matches, but then she has to get the fan base, hashtag let female referee men's matches. Now that's a pretty long hashtag. But have the female referee do something where she wants to referee the men's matches. She wants to referee the main event of WrestleMania, and then there's a controversial decision. And then it's like, wait a minute, did she make the right call? And maybe Triple H or Stephanie or Shane reverses her decision, or Vince. And then they say, wait a minute, why are you reversing the female referee's decision? Is that sexist? You could go all over the place with that. That could be huge. Let the female referee, get her big break, main event referee the match at WrestleMania, and then they undermine her decision, and then you get a whole big sexism angle. That's the way you got to think in this goddamn world. Okay. I'm going to save my thing about that guy in the Primetime Players. I've got a whole big thing about him that I'm going to talk about. But I just want to, going back on the referees for a minute, we look at these referee situations, my mind is just, it's really on all cylinders, folks. We look at these referees, greatest referee of all time, Tommy Young. Most overused, no offense to Nick Patrick, you were just overused in WCW. That whole Starrcade, 97, I was in attendance, it was a lousy night, had a lousy seat, they didn't put the fucking screens on, I'm still pissed. And just, the Hebner's okay, Tim White okay. The last 10 or 15 years, look, Jimmy Kadeiris, some of these referees, despite themselves and despite the WWE, eventually get in your system. Jimmy Kadeiris, I guess, wrote a book. I've been flipping through a few pages. He did a lot of Edge matches or whatever the fuck. But it's just like, I don't know if these days they even give the referees names on TV. Look into this, folks, if you give a flying fuck. Back in the day, the referees were assigned by the state or by, the territory, not by the promotion. So you would see the Hebners refereeing matches, and the ring announcers too. Gary Michael Capetta, if you were in Baltimore and DC, NWA or WWF, you were getting Gary Michael goddamn Capetta as your ring announcer. It's true. And that's going all the way to 84, even 85, and then Vince started doing, locking people down that they had to be his guy, which is, his deal. It's the greatest referee, Tommy Young. I don't know what to say about it. I'm sure I'm forgetting a ton. The female referee angle is genius. They should be using that. Scrappy McGowan. How can you forget? I guess I did, but I didn't. Scrappy McGowan had a crazy look for a referee. Blonde, almost albino-esque. Georgia Championship Wrestling. Once again, wearing an all-blue outfit. Okay, here's a couple of great referees. World Class Championship Wrestling. 2 fucking great referees. David Manning and Rick Hazard. Okay, who did I forget? Bronco Lubick. He was like Grandpa. He's like, okay, Grandpa is refereeing the match. Bronco was this, I guess he was a retired wrestler. He was just so slow, and his cadence was you thought the guy was going to fall asleep. But Rick Hazard and David Manning especially, would do mic work in the middle of a match and get mad. Trying to think of these other promotions. UWF, I can't remember. Carl Fergie comes to mind. Wasn't he a referee? So, somebody can help me out in the comments if you give a flying fuck. Blah, blah, blah. So referees was the topic. I'm going to get to my other thing, and then that's it. Thanks.